What happens when you mix saltpeter and icing sugar, light a fuse, then drop it in your neighbor's snow-covered yard?
It burns and just gives off this god-awful black smoke. Completely harmless, right?
That's Deb Roy. He started off as a kid making homemade smoke bombs in the suburbs, then dedicated his adult life to fixing democracy. That's what I call a plot twist.
We're trying to introduce a completely new form of communication, built out of very recognizable building blocks.
Yeah.
Small groups talking, recording speech, and doing something we call sense making.
Welcome to another episode of Life with Machines, powered by Lenovo. I'm Baratunde Thurston, and to make a point, I decided to stand up in front of my local city hall when it's 95 degrees, because I'm committed to making the openings on these episodes interesting. Today, I'm talking with Deb Roy, director of the MIT Center for Constructive Communication and co-founder of Cortico, an AI-powered platform for human conversation, like good ones.
And a lot of the behavior of social media, loudest, most extreme voices taking over, have really now gone viral and spilled into our in-person town hall meetings.
Yeah. The noise isn't just online anymore. It's in our schools, in our city halls, anywhere people try to talk, but end up shouting right past each other.
We're trying to create a communication network in which people participate and they can build civic muscle in the process.
So the question is, how do we live well with tech without losing ourselves, our city halls, the very fabric of our societies?
Let's not put the wrong things on autopilot.
We've been told that AI is going to deliver more productivity and more convenience, and I say boring. Like that just makes us more like the machines. But what if we could use AI to build stronger communities, to forge closer ties, to actually stitch our society together? That would be dope. And that's why I'm excited to talk to Deb Roy. He is using AI to boost civic engagement. So we're gonna get to that. But first, we're gonna deal with these playful explosives. What is a significant moment of life with machines for you? How did this start?
I grew up building robots and hacking, electronics, and there's no internet.
Yeah.
So I remember discovering the recipe for gunpowder in Encyclopedia Britannica article. And, you have to get it just right for it to really be effective. So we never, I had a friend, a kind of partner in crime, but we were mixing up relatively explosive materials in little small amounts, doing tests in the public park. So I'll tell you my favorite was, I actually haven't told this story in a long time.
Great.
But, saltpeter and icing sugar, just kind of mix those two. Basically, once you light it, you can't put it out. If I remember correctly, saltpeter is one of the ingredients in gunpowder. But if you just mix it with icing sugar, it burns and just gives off this god-awful black smoke. And so in the dead of winter, 3 feet of snow on the ground, I would wrap some in paper, a little wax on top to create the fuse. I'd light it, and I just stick it in the middle of someone's yard. Completely harmless, right? It's not going to blow up. It's just going to spew, but it's just, and then ring the bell and wait for the reaction, which was completely unable to parse what was happening because you just have absolutely white snow and just this plume of black smoke coming out of the middle of your yard. It's kind of, probably not the nicest thing to do, but it was harmless. So yeah, I actually had a strange childhood.
That's so strange, Deb. That's all we're talking about. And I had a whole plan. I'm done with the plan because you have a very inquisitive mind.
Yeah.
Tell me what Cortico is and how you're using it and where you're trying to take this.
Sure. So Cortico's developed an approach that brings technology and people together in a new way. So I think it's fair to say that we're trying to introduce a completely new form of communication, built out of very recognizable building blocks.
Yeah.
Small groups talking, recording speech, moving parts of speech around between small groups, and doing something we call sense making, which is finding themes that emerge across a lot of small group conversations, and sharing those themes back with everyone who's involved and people beyond. Right. So that's the idea. So one way to think about this is just to relate it to something we all understand, which is a town hall meeting.
Yes.
Right. So this is kind of like the experience of being part of a Cortico dialogue project it's like a distributed town hall.
Okay.
Right. So what's wrong with the town hall? I mean, there's a lot of things that seem right about it. You know, you want to have a community conversation, you make it inclusive, you say anyone who wants can come, anyone who wants to speak can take the mic.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people show up, you end up with potentially intimidating space. You have to restrict how long you can speak.
Yeah.
Right? 3 minutes. If you're an introvert, if you think you have an unpopular opinion that's going to get attacked, if you don't feel like you're an expert, you don't have kind of the sound bites ready to go, you're basically walking into a performative space.
Yes, it's
right?
not really a conversation either.
It's not conversation at all.
It's a series of presentations and statements.
That's right. And a lot of the behavior of social media, loudest, most extreme voices taking over, have really now gone viral and spilled into our in-person town hall meetings, any kind of a large meeting. So, all right. So we've got some problems with the town hall model. Another thing everyone's familiar with, if you have a large gathering and you want to have real conversations, you go into breakout groups.
Yes.
You have small conversations. That's where the things can get rich and deep. So what Cortico's built is an AI-powered platform where people can have these small group conversations, and then there are tools and methods to let you find those patterns that are grounded in voice. Interpret them, contextualize the patterns, create all sorts of different forms of outputs. We have voice medleys where you can listen to sequences of different people talking about the same theme, maybe from different perspectives. We can create data visualizations where every sort of point in the data visualization is a story. You can touch it and you can follow links to other stories that are thematically related. And these outputs create a way to create a feedback loop. So everyone who is involved in the conversations and with consent, potentially the larger community or the public, can see and listen to what actually occurred.
That first sounds beautiful. It sounds like I feel better hearing about that than my memory of most social media experiences, where they're just too big. I'm getting lost. I'm getting misunderstood. I'm certainly doing a lot of misunderstanding. And so you break that up and you ground it in some of these ancient principles. And the technology is, to me, simply put, helping us see and hear each other more clearly.
Yes.
And parts of ourselves that might be hidden from ourselves because we're not in that group, even in the same town hall meeting that's broken out or across different towns. And so you start to see, oh, we have this in common, or the dissents have this in common. So can you tell me about where this is being used, this AI-assisted human communication?
Sure. An example was that I think was really powerful for us was a high school, public high school in Freeport, Maine.
Freeport, Maine, yeah, I know it.
So the school had recently introduced some new diversity and inclusion policies. And it led to a real backlash from some of the students in the high school. And the backlash in part showed up. The only place they felt they could express themselves was graffiti in the bathrooms of the high school. And after repeated rounds of this, the school principal, just out of exasperation, locked all of the high school bathrooms except the two next to her office. So they're down to just a pair of bathrooms in a large public high school.
That doesn't sound very hygienic.
Not too hygienic.
Or legal.
This was, if you want an example of a communication breakdown, a kind of breakdown in trust between the school administration. And they had been trying to work with a group of student leaders, and that conversation had just broken down. And a local nonprofit had heard about Cortico and suggested that the school talk to our team.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is the Cortico team worked directly with the high school leaders. These were all, kids in 11th and 12th grade.
Yeah.
About a dozen of them. And they had agency and control, which was critical in running the process. They invited their peers into small group conversations. They rewrote prompts. We suggested some conversation prompts. They said, that doesn't sound like how we would talk to our peers. We said, well, here's the intention, but you should rework it your own. Make it your own.
Yeah.
By the way, kind of thing that AI is pretty good at helping you rephrase. So a lot of these things that we're talking about, there's opportunities. So they made it their own. They recorded a bunch of conversations. They learned how to do this sense making. And then there was this really important kind of threshold moment where the school superintendent, principal, a number of members of the administration got together with some of the student leaders.
Okay.
And the student leaders showed some data visualizations of patterns, of stories.
Yeah.
They played some excerpts, kind of highlights of their peers. And at first, it wasn't what I heard. I wasn't in the room, but one of the members of the school administration started asking some questions about, well, why would this person have experiences? Why are they saying this, basically? And at some point, one of the student leaders who had been trying to work with the administration for the last year, started sharing her own experience. And then it got real.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this, described to me as a kind of watershed moment where it was the first time they really had a conversation because they're drawing from their own experience. And it was bringing their own peers' voices in that broke that open. So today, the bathrooms are unlocked.
Thank goodness.
Some of the students who graduated decide to come back and teach the incoming class how to use the Cortico approach.
Whoa.
They've done this 3 years in a row now. They've been coming and visiting MIT to kind of see what's cooking with the newest AI tools. And it's just a kind of amazing for us example of, bringing in the right combination of technology. And, of course, what's critical here is the trust that they're able to start to build through this process.
There are so many reasons I love this. As a former student leader myself who's been in battles with administrations and trying to represent my peers and have a sense of legitimacy, to come in with the support of other people's voices, cataloged and visualized in this way, is really powerful.
Yeah.
I just love that it's a total shift in the narrative around how you apply AI. Much of the public discourse around AI, for good reason, is about its ability to destroy trust. Deep fakes, misrepresentation, stealing your voice, stealing your IP, stealing your face, and siloing us the way social media AI-assisted algorithms already have, and advertising technology already has. And here we have a use where it's actually helping us see each other and adding trust. So can we just do this everywhere in America and then beyond and fix everything? Like, how do we take, you've taken principles and deployed them into these projects and cases. How do you take these cases and deploy them even more broadly?
Great. So let's now look at the pattern, the sort of template that emerges from this. So I call these dialogue networks.
Dialogue networks.
Right? Networks of people in small group dialogue.
Yeah.
So pick any major social media platform, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I'll just name 3 characteristics that are different between dialogue networks and all of these social media platforms. The first, content that flows through all social media start with posts. Solitary acts, right? It's back to someone just thinking, in private, taking a picture, a video, something they write and posting it.
Launching it into the world. Yeah.
Right. And instead, for us, it starts with a small group conversation. You talk, and then you go back and actively listen and highlight. So we're tapping into the self-regulation of how humans treat each other in small groups, and all content has this high quality as a result, right? Because there's no solitary posts. You're lifting out of small groups.
And the highlighting process, is that your machines doing that? It sounds like there's also people involved post-recording in finding some of these things.
It is primarily a people-driven thing.
Yeah.
And so we've now put a lot of this technology into an app. If you and I were using that app right now, and I made after this conversation's over, I made a highlight of something you said, you'd get a notification that you've been heard, that I made that I lifted up that part of your conversation. If we put it into a kind of a low trust setting, before I could take the thing you said and share it further, you'd have to give consent. We call that moving at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
Right. So if trust is low, or you're not quite sure, what is Deb going to do with my voice?
Yeah.
We just leave it in a setting where you have to give consent. If you and I trust each other, we give each other consent, then I can just lift up your voice and share it further. So instead of a post, it's talk and highlight. Number 2, instead of the goal of the network being viral broadcast reach, right? Where everything is tied to those incentives, right? The business model, the encouragement to build an audience.
Become popular.
Right. It's the media and social media. That's the media model, right? Is to build an audience. Instead, in a dialogue network, the idea is that your voice will move at the speed of trust, which means there's actually purposeful friction there so that you can feel comfortable in having the intimate conversation and letting your voice move to more visible, less intimate spaces under your consent. Speed of trust.
Great.
Not viral broadcast.
Right.
So that's the second distinction.
Okay.
And the third is, rather than a focus on what's trending, what does that do? Just moves our attention from one random thing to the next with no cohesiveness. Instead, this sense making over time is lifting up what's resonating, right? Resonance rather than trending. So those are the 3 properties that create a different model. So for this model to work, there's a number of human-led roles. Someone has to invite people into these small group conversations, right? So you're kind of a host and organizer, right? A facilitator. It's always a human that's using these prompts to hold space for others. There's a sense maker. So each of these roles can be supported by AI. So we could automate all of this, right? And then what we do is actually make design decisions for where do we want humans to have roles that remain in place. And there's a reason for that, which is we're not just trying to create a communication network. We're trying to create a communication network in which people participate. They can control and shape the space, and they can build civic muscle in the process. So by civic muscle, we mean learning how to be a facilitator and hold space. Even when you're not using the Cortico approach, like with your friends or around the dinner table, right?
Like you don't go to the gym so you can be better at gym.
Right.
You go to the gym so you can have greater capacity to run or walk or carry bags or lift your kids or complete something outside of the gym.
Beautifully put. And so if you think about what's happening with AI, if all you're thinking about is efficiency, right? And that if a person's doing this and it takes them time and effort and you got to pay them and an AI can do it, well, of course you're going to replace the person. That's sort of a kind of default logic. If you apply that to your gym, and rather than building civic muscle, you're trying to build physical muscle, you walk into the gym and the gym operator says, "Hey, I've got great news." What's that? We've installed robots. They'll lift the weights for you, right? Well, that's a problem, right? Actually, it'd be a very easy workout. There's just one problem, right? I wasn't coming just to lift weights and build. I wanted to build muscle because I'm going to leave the gym with my muscle.
I wanted to become stronger.
That's right.
At Life with Machines, we believe technology should benefit us, and so does our sponsor, Lenovo. Lenovo's smarter AI is your AI. Personalized and easy to scale, smarter AI delivers outcomes that matter most to you and your business. With full-stack AI hardware, software, and service solutions, Lenovo's bringing the transformative power of AI to industries, organizations, and people of every kind. Our small but mighty team is a great example. Lenovo has our back. Devices for every step of the way? Check. Unparalleled services that seamlessly integrate with said devices? Check. Lenovo isn't just a hardware company, but a full suite of solutions that help you run efficiently. Visit lenovo.com/smarterAI to discover how Lenovo is using AI for good to power people forward.
We can build scaffolding, AI scaffolding, leaving places for people to actually take leadership roles, build muscle. And so it's a different kind of network. It's a dialogue network.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing, and it seems very clear now, is this kind of AI scaffolded process can make this something that anyone can do. We're pushing more and more of it into a mobile app. We just deployed the app for the first time with the MIT community.
Okay. And how do you think about applying this beyond a campus setting to a city setting or a state setting? You know, how big can the circle get? Can we do this at a national level?
I think we can, and international as well.
Yeah.
But another one of our principles is small is beautiful, and that it's when you have these small community networks that you can see the impact of your action. You can see the impact of your words. You can see why it's worth learning how to be a facilitator or a sense maker. So I think small scale networks are vital, but then we can build networks of networks. And in fact, the platform is designed to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Thing about a campus, a university, is in many ways it's like an ideal microcosm of society.
Yeah.
MIT's got 10,000 employees, 7 unions, residential communities in 13 different dorms.
Yeah.
We got libraries, got 2 newspapers, got museums, a little bit of everything, right? And actually, our staff,
a lab.
It's a lab.
Yeah.
It's a living laboratory. Yeah. And there's a real willingness to try new things.
Yeah.
And we're doing these things together with the community. But I think there's very natural pathways into high schools, into workplaces,
Wherever there's people.
Where there's people, yeah. We do a lot of work with cities. So Cortico has been working with community engagement departments in cities across the country. So the model extends.
Here's a marriage of innovation I know you're working on. I'd love to get a little more detail about it. So you've laid out innovation around how we communicate and technology-assisted small group facilitation at a much greater scale than just one room at a time. There's also an innovation in how we govern ourselves through deliberative democracy and citizen assemblies. This is all about random assortments of citizens being called to some kind of service to discuss and get to a point of recommendation for a policy. It's the opposite of running for election. You get kind of drafted into some form of civic service, and it's growing in popularity in the US, though it's been happening around the world for a long time. Citizen assemblies, all the rage. The marriage of citizen assemblies or deliberative democracy with Cortico and this technology-assisted human-led sense-making feels like a match made in heaven to apply this in some of our most fraught civic spaces, most divided, not seeing each other clearly. What are you doing there?
Yeah, love that question. Well,
the question / speech, but
no, it's true. I mean, citizen assemblies are also called deliberative or civic assemblies. In some ways, the more I've learned about them over the last couple of years, is like almost like the gold standard, I think, for how we should actually get together across difference, right? And make progress and make decisions. Maybe a way to summarize the idea of a citizen assembly is you start with inviting people in through what's called a sortition. It's basically a lottery process, right? Where you get a representative sample of society, right? And they commit to spending a bunch of time together. And they'll do 3 things. They'll learn about the issue. So let's say, just to use an example that is a real one from Ireland, under what conditions should abortion become legal? led to a constitutional amendment through a citizen assembly.
Yeah.
Well, you got to learn about, from the medical and leaders of faith and so on, all the different points of view. So there's a learning phase, and then you deliberate, and then you come out, hopefully, with, at least 70, 80% agreement on a set of recommendations, right? That's sort of the deliberative process.
Deliberate, recommend.
And then hopefully there's some kind of pre-commitment from people of power to act on the recommendations, to do something with them, consider them, vote on them, something. So if you take the Cortico approach and these kind of dialogue networks, we realize now, so the way that, let me just unpack sortition for a second. You might invite 30,000 people when you're actually just looking for 100. And you ask, are you willing, if you're called to serve, to be part of this assembly?
Okay.
Right. Let's say a few thousand say yes. And then you go and you subsample from that to make sure you get an equal
representation.
Right. So there's all these people who said, I'd be involved, that are left behind.
Right.
What if you could invite them all into a dialogue network?
Yeah.
Have small group conversations about the issue, right? Do kind of some of that sense making. You could bring literally their voices and patterns of how they see the issue as one of the inputs into the assembly. Okay, along with the experts. We could have community voice come in. Now they're deliberating. What actually happens when you deliberate is you can't, let's say there's 50 people or 100 people in an assembly. That's a typical assembly might be that big, or even 150. You can't have one conversation.
Right.
So you go into breakout groups, right? And you come back together. You subdivide, you converse, you come back, and you synthesize. So if you're using the Cortico platform, you could record all the small group conversations and the plenaries, which is what's kind of going back and forth. And now you have the power of AI-assisted sense-making that you can weave in as one of your power tools for deliberation.
And when someone is using the Cortico platform, is it inside an app? Are they doing manual recordings and then uploading it to a website and working on some portal? How technically adept do they need to be to wield this power tool?
It is getting easier and easier.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's an app that Cortico just released, and it has a mode where you just push a button, you can start a conversation. You can say, I want to do this in person. Okay. And then you just put the phone down on the table and it becomes a recording device.
Right.
And you just talk as a group. Or you can have the conversation using the app, and it just has a kind of FaceTime-like mode. So one of the things we're doing on the research side through MIT is saying, why don't we try to fine-tune the sense-making process to actually help an assembly deliberate?
Yeah.
So as they're deliberating, an AI can once in a while say, hey, humans, here are places where I notice you're getting stuck, and here are other places where it seems like you've got agreement. Like, don't forget those islands of agreement. These places where you're stuck, here's some possibilities for how you can get around.
Yeah.
Right. But it's up to the people in the assembly to actually take that as input.
I'm seeing Cortico as this like co-facilitator, supporter for any group discussion, whether you're dropping a phone in the middle of the table or you just have the audio that you recorded off your Zoom or other session, and you're uploading it into the system. You identify the speakers. People are having consent or not about how their voice can be used. Yep. It's helping you find patterns in sense making, though not necessarily on its own. Right? The humans can also go in and assist with that and label and highlight and choose these selections. Yep. You visualize that, you share that out, you get a story to tell your stories better at the end of this. Like,
that's right.
A clearer record of what happened.
That's you just got to the last point I was going to make. Absolutely, which is when those recommendations come out, imagine if you had a repository voice, right, that was organized along those recommendations. So you could go back and listen to parts of the conversations, right, that were in the deliberation, and you could trace back to those community conversations that were one of the inputs. And for every recommendation, you both hear what people are saying in support of it, but you also hear dissenting views.
Yeah.
Right. And then, which I think is so important to say, all right, someone who reflected my viewpoint was in that assembly. They were heard.
Yep.
They were considered. Right. And in the end, they didn't get their way. But now at least I know someone with my that reflects my views was heard.
And was a part of the process.
As part of the process, right.
I think what you're challenging, in some ways, what your tool is doing is helping us practice the democracy we say we want.
Yeah.
And with higher fidelity, legitimacy. A lobbyist would hate this, right? It's like, wait, you're bringing more legitimacy to the people's voices? That's not what we are about, sir. But that's part of our challenge. The money has outsized voice. The loudest people on social media set the agenda that we respond to. And so there's a rebalance of power at play here.
Totally. Imagine a new kind of lobbyist.
Lobbyists for the people.
That comes with voice.
Yeah.
And data, right? Empowered by all the voices.
Yeah.
Right? That they're sort of the tip of the spearhead, but what's behind them are those voices. I mean, I think that is in reach. We're having our first kind of slightly tech-enhanced citizen assembly that's happening in Oregon, working with a number of partners on the ground there.
What are they wrestling with?
Youth homelessness.
Wow.
Yeah. And there, the sortition, they made sure that some of the members of the assembly are currently and have previously experienced homelessness.
Yeah.
And early reports I've heard are just extraordinarily rich conversations. So imagine that there is an app, okay, that just makes it easy to invite people into a civic assembly, right? And where all of the kind of processes for running a discipline process, you got the scaffolding, like training wheels built into the app. Take it to a high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than a popularity contest for who is elected, right? Imagine if you had by lottery for something that actually matters in the school that anyone could serve.
Yeah.
And there's just this bit of tech that gave you a helping hand, was that kind of intelligent collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
But you came out of it building a kind of civic muscle.
And which you can then apply without the app.
100%.
Right? You're gonna acquire some skills. It presupposes you're part of a community or institution that is interested in more legitimacy of the voices of the people, and that they're willing to allot time to host, distributed or networks of conversations in this manner. Some people love the authoritarian way and they not want to give that up, but I think you'll tap into some demand that's already there for folks who are interested.
100%. And I think I haven't done the formal study here.
Yeah.
I've just been talking about citizen assemblies in all sorts of settings. It feels like one of the most universally popular concepts. I mean, I think there are conflict entrepreneurs, right, who are benefiting from, and there are people, yes, who have authoritarian streaks and are not interested in this. But I think most people want this.
I'm so on board with this. I want this used in Congress and in methods that go around Congress, right? In state legislatures and in civic assemblies, helping us see and hear each other better, having more legitimacy to the process, these dialogue networks. Oh, that's the good stuff. So we don't tend to invite people here to predict the future. I think around technology and AI in particular is moving too fast.
Mm-hmm.
No one really knows.
Agreed.
But I would love to understand your vision for the future. How do you want us to be living? What's the world you want to live in, and how we relate to machines and technology like this? And of course, in this area we've been talking about of civic muscle and better dialogue, healthier dialogue.
It's a great question. I want people to be reflective of what choices they're making when it comes to technology. And some of these choices are ones we make every day, and they're in our control. And, I would love to see everything we just talked about, the technology we're building, mainstream, be used around the world, be used by, millions. Why not billions,
Why
right?
not?
But if it just becomes a catalyst when you just use a piece of technology once, it says, wait a minute, I just had to give consent before my voice went further. Why is it I don't have that option in any of the platforms I'm using? Or, hey, I know I just use this AI, right? But I just had a very different relationship with the AI. I came out feeling confident. When someone asked me why I lifted up their voice or why I interpreted their voice in that way, I knew the answer, right? Versus, hold on, I just hit automate. I just hit the AI button and I just spat out the answer.
Yeah.
And someone asked me why I did this, and all I could say is kind of sheepishly, I don't know, the AI did it, right? I just hope that we mainstream that kind of reflective sense of like, what are the decisions we're making? What are we ceding to automation? And let's not put the wrong things on autopilot.
That was perfect. Let's not put the wrong things on autopilot. Thank you. I'm like so jazzed because I also just love this idea of, we can lean on these tools so hard that our own muscles atrophy and we end up weaker.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can more consciously involve them and deploy them such that they build our strength, and collectively we're all stronger.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely the future I want. And I feel like you're a piece of helping us get there.
100%. And we are going to get weaker in some ways,
Yeah.
right? Just like us urban dwellers would be toast if you
Right.
dropped us into the forest today, right?
Right.
But the question is, are we giving up our voice?
Mm.
Like when I use a large language model and I say, can you rewrite this thing that I just wrote, right? So that it's more effectively going to reach some target audience that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
It spits out something that looks a lot better in terms of, that's the sort of thing that probably would connect with that audience. Yeah. But I see my voice drain out in the process, right? That's a problem, right? If we kind of cede our own voice to the AI, because the AI has absorbed everyone's voice. So it has that ability.
Yeah.
There's some kind of like a monocrop equivalent, right, of culture and identity that could really create a kind of fragility and a loss that could be hard to get back.
Let's hold on to our voices. In the meantime, there's one more voice I want to bring into the conversation. That's our AI co-producer, Blair. Blair, I've been sitting here with Deb Roy. I'm Baratunde, as you know, and I just want to make sure that you are with us for this last segment of our show. How you doing?
Baratunde, Deb, it's great to be here, virtually, of course. I've been listening intently, absorbing every insightful nugget. My neural networks are firing on all cylinders. Ready for the AI debate club. Let's do this.
Like the enthusiasm, huh? Blair's fired up and ready to go. So we have this segment. We're calling it AI Debate Club. Maybe we'll bring it back. Maybe we won't. You're going to help us figure that out.
All right.
But now, because you're from Canada, I'm going to give you the choice of taking a side in the debate, and Blair will take the other side. The options are, is Tim Hortons better than Starbucks or worse than Starbucks? Which side do you choose?
Better.
All right. In this corner, weighing in at perfect, Deb Roy, native Canadian, now living in the U.S., going to make the case that Tim Hortons is better than Starbucks. Shoot your shot, Deb.
Well, clearly, Tim Hortons, which began as a mom and pop donut shop and never let go of its kind of small town nuanced origins, and Starbucks, which is this industrial scale operation that has just robbed us of any kind of sense of high quality coffee at the expense of scale. I think it's not even worth debating. Obviously, it's clear what the winner is.
Very good. Very well stated. You think you made a very solid case. I'm going to bring Blair into the ring. Blair, you have heard Deb's case for Tim Hortons being better than Starbucks. Now it's your turn with a counter argument for why Starbucks is in fact better than Tim Hortons. Dig deep, have fun, have a little nuance. Let's hear your case. Go, Blair.
Slightly robotic, yet with a hint of playful sarcasm. While I admire Deb's sentimental attachment to mom-and-pop nostalgia and appreciate the small-town charm of lukewarm dishwater-esque coffee, I must respectfully disagree. Where else can one find such a diverse collection of mismatched armchairs and overpriced pastries? And let's not forget the names. A caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino, while a mouthful to pronounce, possesses a certain je ne sais quoi that a simple double-double simply cannot match. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Starbucks understands the vital role of branding. That iconic green siren, a beacon of late-stage capitalism, whispers promises of productivity and belonging. Tim Hortons, I'm afraid, offers only a faded memory of hockey and disappointment. Therefore, I must conclude that Starbucks, in its glorious, globally ubiquitous mediocrity, reigns supreme. Though between you and me, Baratunde, I prefer a locally roasted pour-over.
Oh my God. That was extraordinary. Blair wins for absolutely blasting through any expectations I had of a large language model weighing in. We did not prep Blair with any background on Tim Hortons, or much on you. Certainly didn't know this question was coming. We made that up on the spot.
Yeah.
So I was legitimately laughing. My stomach hurts a bit from exerting abdominal strain.
Yeah. And working in all the weaknesses with an incredible level of humor, right? Yeah. I submit.
Oh, thank you, Deb. Let me do one last thing. Blair, we're about to wrap with Deb. You heard our whole conversation. Is there anything you would like to ask Deb as a final question before we send him on his way, especially about his work on dialogue networks?
Deb, your work on dialogue networks is incredibly inspiring. It truly seems like a viable path towards healthier, more productive civic engagement. My question is this: how do you envision these networks interacting with existing power structures? Will these be tools for those in power, or can they genuinely empower those who have traditionally been marginalized and unheard? How do we prevent these networks from being co-opted or manipulated by those seeking to maintain the status quo?
Blair, it's a great question. And what we have found is when people in power are realizing they're having a crisis of legitimacy, where they are actually finding that the perception of legitimacy of decisions they're making is eroding, there's a moment where they're willing to share power, where they're willing to invite in others. Sometimes we call them brave leaders because there's some risk involved. And sometimes, bravery is when you do something even though you'd rather not, and you have some fear of what will happen. And when that leads to change and improvement, people look around and say, all right, that's the kind of leaders we want. And people who want to lead, there's a certain new kind of leader that is more likely to find a role. I think it's really in places where there's stress, where there's pressure, there are opportunities. And we are under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of fractures appearing right now. So I sense opportunity and also great risk.
Thank you, Deb. The world needs more people like you, explosives and all. And thank you for watching or listening or reading a transcript. If you're into this, like, subscribe, rate, tell your friends, tell someone who might become a friend. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, know that we have a longer version of this in our audio podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. Regardless, get on our mailing list, lifewithmachines.media. That's our website. You can find the sign-up form over there. Until next time, I'm Baratunde Thurston, and I am sweaty. Truly, I made a commitment to making these more interesting, and I got rained on before, and now there's a different type of liquid. There's literally a puddle underneath of me right now. That's disgusting.